you assume a position as chief of staff of one of the most important agencies in the state of New Jersey, overseeing $11 to $12 billion in construction projects, correct?
Correct.
You have indicated that in the past you've worked for various positions, New Way for New Jersey, and someone hired you. The campaign, someone hired you and you testified. The transition, someone hired you and you testified. Now the question I have is, who hired you to be chief of staff of the SDA at $140,000 a year?
So again, those conversations began during the transition. I expressed my interest in working at the SDA, first as potentially the CEO, and then eventually as a chief of staff when I was made aware that the CEO position was not available to me. And I was told by Mr. Lozano that if I was interested in the SDA position, I needed to sit and meet with Mr. McKenna, Charlie McKenna, who was then the CEO.
Well, Mr. McKenna has testified under oath. He didn't hire you.
I don't know how that's accurate in the sense that, typically speaking, the agency is an in but not of. It's part of the Treasury. So I do know that factually I received a letter from the transition office from the director of personnel, my immediate supervisor, Lynn Haynes, giving me the title and the position. So if technically speaking, that was the letter of employment. But all of my conversations with Mr. McKenna were about what I needed to do to become part of the online payroll, parking, all of the things. All of my transition into the SDA was through Mr. McKenna.
Before you get to those types of considerations, someone has to hire you. Who hired you?
I mean, again, my official employment letter offering me the position and giving me the title and my salary was set by the transition office in a letter I received from Lynn Haynes.
Yeah, well, Lynn Haynes has testified, and we have the letter right here, and we could show it to you, and I will. She basically said that the letter you received was a form letter, not signed by her, but by auto pen. And she testified that the only people, since she was, well, first of all, what position did Lynn Haynes hold?
Director of Personnel for Transition.
She was your boss, correct?
Yes.
She said the only people who had the authority to hire you would be Mr. Platkin, Mr. Camerano, and Mr. Lozano. She didn't have the authority to hire you. That's what she testified under oath, correct?
Okay.
Now, of those three, who hired you?
I couldn't tell you.
You just assumed a position?
I spoke to all of those individuals about my interest in this job. No one ever told me that I was not qualified or that I should not seek that position. I was again told that if I wanted that position, to meet with Mr. McKenna. Eventually, I received a letter saying that I was getting that job.
But I understand all that. That's all the lead up. You're qualified, you're interested, but then somebody has to say, you're hired. Who said you're hired?
So to answer your question, I never had a conversation with Mr. Camerano where he sat me down and interviewed me and said, you want the job of Chief of Staff? You're hired. I never had that conversation with him, never had that conversation with Mr. Lozano. No one ever said to me, you're hired. I expressed to them my interest. I would agree with Ms. Haynes' testimony that ultimately the powers that be in those conversations, and that's why I was having those conversations, were Mr. Camerano and Mr. Lozano, in the sense that if there was an obstacle in obtaining that position, they would have made me aware.